Hey everyone. You know how we're constantly hearing about these massive data breaches, right? It's enough to make anyone paranoid about their online security.
It really is.
Well, today we're going to dig into a crucial part of the security puzzle that's designed to fight back. Privileged Access Management, or PAM.
PAM.
Yeah, think of it as the ultimate defense system for your most valuable data.
That's a great way to put it. We're talking about those accounts that, if they fall into the wrong hands, could cause some serious damage.
Exactly. And you've sent us some really fascinating material on this topic, wanting to go deeper on PAM. We're definitely up for that challenge.
Awesome.
Get ready for some insights on how PAM works, why it's become so vital these days, and how it's evolving to keep up with those ever-changing threats out there.
One of the things that often surprises people is that PAM isn't just about some fancy new technology. It's really a fundamental shift in how we approach security, thinking proactively about those with the highest levels of access.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So break it down for us. What exactly is Privileged Access Management? What does it look like in action?
At its core, PAM is a system that protects those most critical assets by tightly controlling access to those powerful privileged accounts. It's about knowing who has access to what, monitoring their activity, and preventing any unauthorized access.
So it's like having a super vigilant security guard for those accounts that could really do damage.
Exactly. We're talking about accounts that can change system configurations, access sensitive data, or even control entire networks.
Wow,
If compromised, the impact could be catastrophic.
that makes perfect sense.
Hmm.
So how does PAM actually work in practice? It seems like a pretty complex system to wrap your head around.
It might sound complicated, but the core functions are surprisingly straightforward. First, PAM helps you identify all those privileged accounts lurking in your systems, and believe me, there are often more than you think. Then it's about setting clear policies and automating as much as possible to reduce those oops moments where someone accidentally gets too much access.
So less chance of leaving the keys to the castle lying around.
Right,
I like it.
precisely. Then there's session monitoring, where PAM acts like a watchful eye, recording everything happening within those privileged sessions. This helps detect anything fishy going on and provides a trail of evidence if things go wrong. It's kind of like having a security camera, but for digital actions.
Okay, that makes me feel a little more secure already. What else?
Well, PAM also enforces access control using the principles of just in time and just enough access.
Those sound like they go hand in hand. What do they mean exactly?
Think of it this way. Instead of giving someone a master key that unlocks every door, you give them a temporary key card that only unlocks the specific doors they need for the exact amount of time required to complete their task.
Mm-hmm.
Much safer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I see what you mean. It's about minimizing the window of opportunity for anything to go wrong.
exactly. And finally, PAM systems generate detailed reports on all privileged activity. This helps ensure compliance with regulations, because let's be honest, nobody wants those hefty fines for not having their security in order.
Yeah,
Right.
that's for sure. Speaking of those privileged accounts, we know PAM is all about managing them. But who exactly are these privileged users we keep talking about?
That's a great question. There's actually a whole spectrum of privileged accounts out there. Some, like super user accounts, have ultimate power over files, configurations, even entire systems.
That sounds a bit intimidating.
It can be. Then you have domain administrator accounts. Think of them as the rulers of entire domains, with control spanning multiple servers and systems.
Okay, starting to see how things can get complicated quickly.
And then we've got local administrator accounts, which have a more focused scope. They have admin control over specific servers or workstations.
So different levels of access depending on their role and responsibilities. Makes sense. What other types of privileged users are out there?
Well, we also have application administrator accounts that can control specific applications and all their data. These are especially tempting targets for attackers looking to steal valuable information or disrupt critical services.
So PM helps lock down those applications as well.
Absolutely. Then there are service accounts that enable smooth communication between applications and operating systems. They often have elevated privileges to perform their tasks, so they need to be carefully managed too.
Wow, it's like a whole digital ecosystem of privileged accounts, each with its own level of access and potential risks.
Exactly. And let's not forget about business privileged accounts, which grant elevated access based on specific job roles. For example, someone in finance might have access to sensitive financial data that others shouldn't see.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about aligning access with the responsibilities of the role. Are there any other types of privileged users?
One more. Emergency accounts. Think of these as the break glass in case of fire accounts, providing temporary access when absolutely necessary.
So like when a system goes down and someone needs to get in quickly to fix things.
Exactly. But these emergency accounts need extra security because they often bypass normal controls to allow for quick action.
Okay, so PAM is about managing this entire hierarchy of privileged users, each with its own level of access and potential risk. Now,
Mm.
something I found really interesting in the research was this distinction between PAM and something called PIM. Can you explain the difference?
You're right. PAM and Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, are often mentioned together. They both deal with managing privileged access, but their focus is slightly different.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do they differ?
Think of PAM as the overarching security guard, controlling and monitoring access to those privileged accounts. PIM, on the other hand, focuses on granting temporary time-bound access for very specific tasks. It's like issuing a special pass that expires after a certain time or once the task is complete.
So PAM is the gatekeeper and PM is the system that issues those temporary passes.
Right.
That's a helpful way to visualize it.
Exactly. And both are crucial for creating a secure and efficient system for managing privileged access.
Okay, all this talk about privileged accounts and potential security breaches is making me a bit nervous. But seriously, why is PAM so important? What are the real-world stakes here?
Well, remember all those headlines about major data breaches? They often happen because attackers gain access to privileged accounts. The cost of these breaches can be astronomical, both financially and in terms of damage to a company's reputation.
That's a scary thought, and I bet most people don't realize that it's not always some sophisticated hack that causes these breaches.
You're right. Often it's as simple as exploiting weak passwords or accounts that have more access than they need. That's where PAM comes in. It's about reducing those vulnerabilities and making it much harder for attackers to gain a foothold.
So PAM is about creating a more robust security posture, even if human error or weak passwords are involved.
Precisely. And here's the thing. It's not just about external attackers. Sometimes the biggest threat comes from within an organization. We're talking about accidental misuse, negligence, or even malicious insiders who abuse their privileges.
I never thought about it that way. So PAM is about protecting against both external A&D internal threats.
Absolutely. It's about creating a comprehensive security strategy that minimizes risk from all angles.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if an organization decides to implement PAM, what are some of the best practices to ensure it's truly effective?
Well, first and foremost, multi-factor authentication is a must.
So it's not enough to just have a username and password.
Definitely not. Think of it like adding extra locks to that vault door. Multi-factor authentication requires users to provide multiple forms of identification before granting access, making it much harder for attackers to impersonate legitimate users.
Makes sense. What else is on the PAM best practices list?
Automation is key. Automating security tasks as much as possible not only makes life easier for IT teams, but also dramatically reduces the risk of human error.
We're talking about automating things like account creation and deletion, password management, and even threat detection and response.
I can see how automation would not only streamline things, but also make the whole system more secure. What other best practices should organizations keep in mind?
We've touched on this before, but the principles of just-in-time and just enough access are really crucial. By granting access only when it's needed, and only for as long as it's needed, you significantly limit the window of opportunity for attackers to exploit vulnerabilities.
So instead of giving someone permanent access, you're giving them a temporary pass to get the job done.
Exactly. And let's not forget about continuous session monitoring. It's like having a security camera that's always watching, recording privileged user activity, and alerting security teams to anything suspicious.
That's reassuring to know. It's like having an extra set of eyes on those critical accounts.
Right. And finally, one of the most important best practices. Avoid perpetual privileges.
Okay, explain what you mean by that. Essentially, it's about making sure those privileges expire. Just like a concert ticket, access should have an expiration date. This minimizes the risk of compromised accounts hanging around with access they no longer need.
That's a really good point. It's like limiting the damage a compromised account can do, even if it falls into the wrong hands.
Exactly. By following these best practices, organizations can significantly strengthen their security posture and protect themselves from a wide range of threats.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, and it's clear that PAM is a complex and constantly evolving field. But with technology changing so rapidly, I have to wonder, what does the future hold for PAM? What are the emerging trends and challenges on the horizon?
That's a great question, and it's one that security experts are constantly grappling with. We're seeing a convergence of trends that are reshaping the cybersecurity landscape: the rise of cloud computing, the increasing complexity of DevOps, and the explosion of the Internet of Things. All of these present new challenges for PAM, and we need to adapt to stay ahead of the curve.
That's fascinating. So how is PAM evolving to address these new challenges?
One of the key trends is the growing importance of integration. PAM systems need to seamlessly integrate with cloud platforms, DevOps tools, and even those countless IoT devices to provide comprehensive protection across an organization's entire digital ecosystem. It's no longer about securing isolated systems, it's about creating a unified security fabric.
That makes sense. Everything is so interconnected these days that a fragmented approach to security just won't cut it. What about automation? We talked about its importance for basic PAM functions, but does it play a role in the future of PAM as well?
Absolutely. As the threat landscape becomes more complex and attackers become more sophisticated, automation will be even more crucial. We're talking about things like AI-powered threat detection and response, automated risk analysis, and even predictive security modeling.
Wow, it sounds like PAM is becoming more intelligent and proactive.
It has to be. We need to leverage the power of technology to stay ahead of the game, and automation is a critical part of that.
Okay, with technology changing so rapidly, what do you think the next big challenge for PAM will be?
That's a tough one, but if I had to guess, I'd say that one of the biggest challenges will be finding the right balance between security and usability.
What do you mean by that?
As PAM systems become more sophisticated, there's a risk that they could become overly complex and difficult to use, especially for non-technical users.
So it's about making sure that PAM is not only secure, but also user-friendly. I could see how that would be a delicate balancing act.
Exactly. And finding that sweet spot will be key to the success of PAM in the years to come.
Okay, that's some serious food for thought. We'll have to keep that in mind as we move into the next part of our deep dive into PAM.
I'm looking forward to it. There's so much more to explore.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground here, but hopefully you're starting to see just how crucial PAM is in today's increasingly digital and interconnected world.
It really is a foundational element of any robust cybersecurity strategy.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll delve even deeper into the practical applications of PAM.
Welcome back. I'm eager to continue our exploration of privileged access management and its impact on real-world security.
Me too. We covered a ton of ground in the first part, from the nuts and bolts of how PAM works to the diverse cast of characters, those privileged users that we need to keep an eye on. But before we get too deep into the weeds, I think it's important to step back and really drive home why this all matters.
Absolutely. Let's remind ourselves why PAM is so crucial in today's world. It's not just about implementing a specific technology, it's about peace of mind, knowing that your most valuable assets, your data, systems, even your reputation, are protected from both internal and external threats.
We've talked about those high-stakes data breaches and how the cost of these incidents is through the roof. But is PAM only for those big corporations or government agencies we hear about in the news?
Not at all. Any organization that handles sensitive data from small businesses and nonprofits to educational institutions needs to be thinking about privileged access security. In fact, smaller organizations can be even more vulnerable because they often have fewer resources to dedicate to cybersecurity.
That makes sense. It's like having a strong lock on your door no matter the size of your house.
Exactly. And one of the things I find so compelling about PAM is that it's not just a reactive measure. It's not about cleaning up the mess after a breach, but about proactively preventing those breaches from happening in the first place.
It's like building a fortress around your data, rather than just hoping for the best.
That's a great analogy. And the beauty of PAM is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are different approaches, tools, and levels of complexity so organizations can find a PAM solution that fits their specific needs and budget.
That's reassuring. So we've established that PAM is important, it's proactive, and it's adaptable. But for someone completely new to this, where do they even start?
That's a fair point. It can feel overwhelming at first, but the good news is that there are plenty of resources to guide organizations on their PAM journey. For instance, industry organizations like the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, provide excellent guidance and best practices for implementing PAM.
So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can leverage the expertise of those who have been down this road before.
Exactly. And don't forget about the numerous vendors offering PAM solutions. Many provide free trials or demos so you can test the waters and see how their products work before committing.
So there's no excuse for not at least exploring what PAM can do.
I wholeheartedly agree. And it's essential to remember that PAM isn't a set it and forget it project. It's an ongoing process. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so your PAM strategy needs to evolve with it.
So it's about staying vigilant, adapting to new threats, and continuously improving your security posture.
Precisely. That's why a solid understanding of the principles behind PAM is so vital. It's not just about implementing a specific technology, it's about developing a security mindset, understanding the risks, and taking proactive steps to mitigate them.
It sounds like it's a combination of technology, human awareness, and a commitment to continuous improvement.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's what makes PAM so fascinating. It sits at the intersection of technology, security, and human behavior.
Now, we talked about the different types of privileged accounts earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting those, especially for our listener who's digging deep into PAM. Understanding who these privileged users are is key to grasping why PAM is so essential.
You're absolutely right. We touched on the various types earlier, but let's delve a bit deeper into why each type needs careful management. What really are the risks if they're compromised?
Okay, let's start with those super user accounts.
Mhm.
You mentioned they have ultimate power. What makes them so risky if they fall into the wrong hands?
Super user accounts are like having the master key to your entire digital kingdom. They have unrestricted access to all systems and data, meaning they can do virtually anything they want.
That sounds both powerful and terrifying at the same time.
It is. Imagine an attacker gaining access to a super user account. They could steal sensitive data, install malware, disrupt critical operations, or even bring down entire systems.
Okay, that's definitely a nightmare scenario. So how does PAM help prevent that?
By implementing layers of protection, it starts with tightly controlling who has access to those super user accounts in the first place. Then it's about monitoring their activity, making sure they only have the privileges absolutely necessary for their role, and ensuring that every action is logged and auditable.
It sounds like PAM is all about minimizing the risk, even if an account is compromised. Do the same principles apply to those other types of privileged accounts, like domain administrator accounts?
Absolutely. Domain administrator accounts also wield significant power, controlling entire domains that can span multiple servers and systems. If compromised, the attacker could potentially gain access to vast amounts of data and resources.
So the same layered approach of control, monitoring, and auditing is crucial for those accounts as well.
Exactly. Then you have those local administrator accounts, which we mentioned earlier. While their scope is more limited than super users or domain admins, they can still pose a significant risk if misused. This is where those insider threats we talked about earlier become a real concern.
You mean like a disgruntled employee with local admin rights, deleting critical files, or installing malicious software?
Precisely. It's a stark reminder that PAM is about more than just technology. It's about people, processes, and creating a culture of security awareness.
It's about building a security-conscious environment where everyone understands the importance of protecting sensitive data and using their privileges responsibly.
Well said. And it's also about establishing clear policies and procedures and providing training and education to all users, especially those with privileged access.
So it's a holistic approach to security that involves technology, people, and processes all working together.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears and talk about those application administrator accounts. They hold the keys to specific applications and their data, which can be incredibly valuable to attackers, especially if those applications handle sensitive financial information, customer data, or intellectual property.
So PAM helps protect those applications too, right?
Absolutely. But application admin accounts often require a slightly different approach to security because applications have their own unique configurations and vulnerabilities.
So the PAM solution needs to be tailored to the specific needs of each application.
Precisely. The PAM system needs to integrate with those applications seamlessly and understand their unique security requirements to provide effective protection.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about those service accounts we talked about earlier? The ones that work behind the scenes to keep everything running?
Those are interesting because they're often not directly associated with a specific human user, which can make them trickier to manage.
So it's harder to track their activity and make sure
Mhm.
they're not being misused.
Exactly. That's why strong security controls for service accounts are so important. We're talking about things like regularly reviewing their privileges, limiting their access to only what's absolutely necessary, and closely monitoring their activity for anything suspicious.
So even though they're not controlled by a human, They still need to be treated as high-risk accounts and carefully managed.
Absolutely. Now, let's not forget about those business privileged accounts, the ones that are tied to specific job roles, like giving a marketing manager access to the company's social media accounts or a financial analyst access to sensitive financial data.
Right, those accounts make sense. But what makes them so challenging from a security perspective?
The challenge is that they can proliferate over time as new roles are created and responsibilities change. It's easy to lose track of who has access to what.
So PAM helps keep things organized and ensures that people only have access to the information they need to do their jobs.
Exactly. And this is where automation can be incredibly helpful by automating the process of provisioning and deprovisioning those accounts as roles change and employees come and go. It streamlines the process and reduces the risk of human error.
Okay, that makes sense. It's all about staying on top of those access rights. Now, you mentioned emergency accounts earlier, those break glass in case of emergency accounts. What makes those so unique from a security perspective?
Emergency accounts are interesting because they often bypass those normal security controls to allow for swift action during a crisis.
So if a critical system goes down, someone can get in quickly to fix it, even if they don't have their usual level of access.
Precisely. But that also makes those emergency accounts tempting targets for attackers. They know those accounts often have high levels of privilege and might have weaker security measures in place because of the need for quick access.
So how do you balance the need for quick access in an emergency with the need for strong security?
It's a delicate balancing act. But you can still implement strong security measures for emergency accounts, such as multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, and strict access controls that limit what those accounts can do. You can also limit the number of emergency accounts and carefully track their usage to ensure they are only used when absolutely necessary.
Okay, so even in emergency situations, security can't be an afterthought.
Absolutely. Now, we've gone deep into the different types of privileged accounts, but the most crucial takeaway is that PAM isn't about finding a perfect solution and calling it a day. It's a journey, a continuous process of learning, adapting, and improving your organization's security posture.
So it's a mindset, a commitment to ongoing improvement rather than a destination.
Exactly. The threat landscape is constantly shifting, and new vulnerabilities are always emerging. The more you learn about PAM, the more you'll realize how much there is to know and how important it is to stay informed and proactive.
Well, that's the beauty of the deep dive, right? We're here to help our listeners explore these complex topics and understand how they impact their world.
That's exactly right. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some real-world examples of how PAM is being used to protect organizations of all sizes and industries, highlighting its practical applications and the challenges it faces.
That sounds fascinating.
Mhm.
I'm excited to dive into those real-world examples. Welcome back. I'm really looking forward to this last part of our PAM deep dive because we're going to get into some real-world examples and see how all of this plays out in practice.
I think you'll find these examples quite illuminating. It's one thing to discuss the theory and principles of PAM, but seeing how it's actually used to solve real-world problems really brings it all home.
Okay, so let's start with something relatable. Let's say we're talking about a healthcare organization. They're dealing with tons of sensitive patient data and facing increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks.
Absolutely. And they're subject to strict regulations like IPA, which mandates stringent security measures to protect that data.
So where does PAM fit into this complex landscape? What role does it play in safeguarding patient information?
Well, in a healthcare setting, you have a wide range of privileged users, doctors, nurses, administrators, IT staff, all needing access to different systems and data to do their jobs.
And PAM would help ensure that they only have access to the information they absolutely need and only when they need it. Kind of like a digital keycard that grants specific permissions.
Precisely. So, for example, a nurse might need access to a patient's medical records to provide care, but they wouldn't need access to the hospital's financial systems. CAM helps enforce those boundaries and ensures that everyone operates within their designated areas of responsibility.
That makes sense. It's about keeping things compartmentalized and minimizing the risk of unauthorized access. But what about accountability? How does PAM help track who accessed what information and when?
That's a crucial aspect of PAM. It provides a detailed audit trail of all privileged activity, recording who accessed what data, when they accessed it, and what actions they performed. This is not only essential for compliance with regulations like APA, but also for investigating security incidents and identifying any suspicious behavior.
So it's not just about preventing breaches, but also about having that forensic trail to understand what happened if something does go wrong.
Exactly. It's about having that visibility and accountability, which are essential for maintaining a strong security posture. And this is just one example. PAM can be applied to virtually any industry or organization that handles sensitive data, from retail and finance to government and education.
Okay, so let's say we're talking about a financial institution, a bank, for example. They're dealing with highly sensitive financial data, account information, and are prime targets for cybercriminals. How would PAM be used in that context?
Well, banks are under constant threat from cyber attacks, so they need to have extremely robust security measures in place, and PAM is a critical component of their defense strategy.
Because they're entrusted with safeguarding our money and personal financial information, right?
Exactly. And they're subject to a whole host of regulations, like PCI DSS, which sets stringent standards for protecting credit card data. PAM helps them meet those compliance requirements by controlling and monitoring access to sensitive systems and data.
So PAM acts as a gatekeeper, ensuring that only authorized personnel can access certain areas and that their actions are closely monitored.
Precisely. And in a bank, you might have different teams, loan officers, tellers, investment advisors, each with their own specific access needs. PAM ensures that each user only has access to the systems and data relevant to their role, preventing them from straying into areas where they don't belong.
It's like having a security guard for each department, making sure that everyone stays in their designated areas.
That's a great analogy. And PAMA goes beyond just controlling access. It's also used to monitor transactions, detect anomalies, and prevent fraud. For example, it can flag suspicious activities, like large withdrawals or transfers that deviate from a customer's usual pattern.
So PAM is actively looking for red flags and helping banks stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
Right. And it can even be used to help banks comply with anti-money laundering regulations by tracking and flagging suspicious transactions for further investigation.
Wow, so PAM really is a multifaceted tool that plays a vital role in protecting our financial system.
It is, and its applications extend far beyond finance. Let's consider government agencies, for instance. They're responsible for protecting highly sensitive information, national security secrets, citizen data, critical infrastructure, and the stakes are incredibly high.
So in a government setting where you have different departments, agencies, and levels of security clearance, how does PAM help manage that complex web of access privileges?
That's where PAM's role becomes even more critical. It helps enforce those need-to-know policies, ensuring that individuals only have access to the information they are authorized to see based on their clearance level.
So it's like a digital hierarchy of access, with PAM acting as the enforcer.
Exactly. And it's not just about controlling access. It's also about monitoring activity, detecting intrusions, and preventing data leaks, which could have severe consequences for national security or public safety.
It sounds like PAM is an indispensable tool for government agencies tasked with protecting sensitive information and critical infrastructure.
Absolutely. And these are just a few examples of how PAM is being used in the real world to strengthen security and protect sensitive data. Its applications are vast and constantly evolving as new technologies and threats emerge.
These examples have been really insightful. They paint a clear picture of how PAM is being deployed across various industries to address a wide range of security challenges. But can you give us an example of a specific situation where PAM actually prevented a major security breach? I think that would really help our listener grasp its real-world impact.
Of course. There was a case where a large retail company was targeted by a sophisticated phishing attack. The attackers were able to deceive several employees into clicking on malicious links, which compromised their login credentials.
So the attackers were able to penetrate the company's outer defenses and gain a foothold within their network.
Right. But fortunately, the company had implemented a robust PAM solution that included multi-factor authentication and just-in-time access. Those layers of security proved to be crucial in thwarting the attack.
So even though the attackers had stolen employee credentials, they couldn't move laterally within the network or access sensitive systems because they were stopped by those additional security hurdles.
Exactly. The PAM system detected the suspicious activity and prevented the attackers from escalating their privileges or accessing critical data. It acted like a digital guardian angel, protecting the company's crown jewels.
That's a fantastic example of how PAM can be a game changer. It highlights how those layers of security can make all the difference in preventing a potentially catastrophic breach.
It does, and it reinforces the importance of having a comprehensive security strategy that goes beyond just basic perimeter defenses. PAM is an essential component of that layered approach, helping organizations minimize their attack surface and protect their most valuable assets.
Well, I have to say this deep dive into PAM has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better understanding of what it is, how it works, and why it's so crucial in today's world.
I'm glad to hear that. And I hope this has encouraged you to delve deeper into PAM and explore how it might benefit your own organization or field of interest.
Absolutely. As we've learned, PAM is not just some abstract technical concept. It's a real-world solution that's making a tangible difference in protecting sensitive data and mitigating cyber threats.
Couldn't agree more. It's a vital part of our collective defense against the ever-evolving landscape of cyber attacks.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of privileged access management.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise. And to our listener, we encourage you to continue exploring this crucial area of cybersecurity. The more we understand about how to protect our digital assets, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of the digital age.
Well said. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay secure.